You can really get targeted precision care with knowing your genetics, pairing that with symptoms, a meticulous intake, health history, and lab work, because genetics are not a diagnosis, but they really provide clarity and a framework for why you reacted a certain supplement or drug, which antioxidant would be best, which liver detox pathway would be most effective supporting. Genetic variant, it's really like a dimmer switch. So the amount of toxicity or stress or trauma that you may determine how turned on or turned off that gene will be expressing.
Welcome to the Inspired Living with Autoimmunity podcast, the podcast for high achievers who want to stay sharp, focused, and full of energy despite their diagnosis. With your host, National Board Certified Functional Medicine Health Coach, Julie Michelson, where Julie helps you take your power back from autoimmunity. And now here's your host, Julie Michelson.
Welcome back to the Inspired Living with Autoimmunity podcast. I'm your host, Julie Michelson. And today I'm joined by Jaclyn Downs, the author of the academically published book, Enhancing Fertility Through Functional Medicine, Using Nutrigenomics to Solve Unexplained Infertility. Jaclyn is a functional genomics analyst that helps clients and practitioners move past puzzling roadblocks and individualized protocols through the use of genomic interpretation, functional lab testing, and meticulous intake consultation. In today's conversation, we're discussing how understanding your genetics can be a powerful tool for optimizing your health, whether it is to improve fertility, reverse autoimmune symptoms, or enhance longevity. Jaclyn, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me here. I'm really excited to be here.
I'm excited for our conversation. I was chatting before we hit record saying, to me, when I think of fertility, which I know is, at least the topic of your last book, but that's our most healthy state, right? When we're not healthy, our body doesn't use resources to reproduce. And so I have had people ask me before in other episodes, why a fertility expert, and we're going to focus in on the genomics and nutrigenomics today, but it's that direct connect. Wellness is wellness. And the things that negatively impact fertility are the same. It's all inflammation, at least in my lay opinion. Comes down to chronic inflammation for different reasons. And so can lead to autoimmunity, can lead to infertility, other chronic health challenges. So that was why I was really excited to have you join us today.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I completely agree. It really all comes down to the health of the cell and oxidative stress. And so while I wrote my book geared towards the fertility demographic for motivated lay people, I'm not your first stop if you're still eating, fast food every day, but for people that have really tried to educate themselves, right? But also the book is written for practitioners to give them more clinical tools to help discover common but lesser known causes of oxidative stress that causes inflammation that is at the root of all chronic conditions. And fertility is especially predominant with that because, like you had said, the body has a protective mechanism, and if it doesn't feel that it has enough energy, or it has some toxicities, or some reason that it feels that now is not a good time to make a baby, it's going to halt mating ability. So the body needs to feel healthy and resilient and nurtured and have a good resource of energy production.
Amen. Tell us a little bit about, I am excited by, and I'm a geek, listeners know, I'm excited by and fascinated with you as somebody who didn't win the lucky hand in genetics. I love that we have these conversations, not because someone can be like, well, it's all my parents' fault. But we can do things. It's empowering to understand, okay, this is the hand I was dealt. How do we prevent, or how do we reverse things that are going on that we may not want? happening. So how did you, this is a huge subject. Many think it's a new field. How did you get into genomics?
So I've always been interested in nutrition. My dad was a nutritional biochemist, and I talk about that in my book about how guaranteed I was the only kid in seventh grade who knew what a probiotic was in the early 90s, right? But I because I'd seen how people react to my dad because he was thinking outside the conventional box, and he was called a quack and all of that. I knew, because what he said made sense. I knew that there was more information than I didn't want to become a registered dietitian. Nothing against them. It's just, a lot of people go further into their education so that they can go beyond just the American Dietetic Associations, sponsored by Cargill, Pepsi, Sara Lee, M&M, Mars. I didn't want that education. So they didn't have that education when in any colleges in Pennsylvania. Sure. It was all just your, antiquated nutrition information. So I ended up getting a psychology degree, and during that education, I learned about psychoneuroimmunology.
Yes.
And so that kind of put the holistic mind, body, spirit all connected, like into science terms.
Right.
And I didn't know back then that I would be the science geek that I am today, but like I loved that it helped to put it into a scientific perspective as opposed to just some crunchy granola girl.
Sure.
So I more recently, I guess it was about 10 or 12 years ago, I wanted to get a job that didn't require me to be on call, because my previous career was in birth work as a doula, an apprentice to midwife and stuff. And so I got a job researching MTHFR. Again, this was about 11 or 12 years ago. And I laugh now because my whole job was to research this one gene. And then that quickly turned into the whole methylation pathway and transsulfuration pathway, and then how that pathway intersects genes that make up another pathway. And so it just exploded with the amount of genes and pathways and information and things that I was researching. And I took that research, and it made so much sense with my passion for female reproduction and fertility. And so I sort of dovetailed my previous career in birth work with my current knowledge in nutrition, and especially genomics. And I could see how your genes can really affect things that affect your fertility, like your detoxification ability and inflammation and immune system reactivity and all kinds of stuff, histamine intolerance. So it all just made so much sense to me. And I felt I could pass the baton being a doula, because there were now plenty of doulas in my town, but nobody was really taking the approach that I have to fertility, and how you can really, really get targeted precision care with knowing your genetics, pairing that with symptoms, a meticulous intake, health history, and lab work, because then all arrows are pointing in the same direction. Because I say your genetics are not a diagnosis, but they really, really provide clarity and a framework for why things may be the way they are, or why you reacted a certain way to a certain supplement or drug, or which protocol would be best for you, which antioxidant would be best for you, which liver detox pathway would you be most effective supporting.
I love that. That's amazing. And I applaud the thinking that you were raised to think outside of the box, which is great. I want to circle all the way back, because I wanted to hear a little bit of your journey and how did you get to be doing this. But I want to circle back. You mentioned oxidative stress. And so I want to talk about that a little bit. It's a conversation I don't think have had on the podcast. Like what is it? And is, it's our body's an amazing thing. I know we need oxidative stress. Like it's not all bad across the board, just like inflammation is not bad across the board. So because you said that this is kind of like a big deal, right?
Yes.
So educate us a little bit.
Okay. So yeah, in my book, I state that I want to shout from the rooftops about oxidative stress so that it becomes a common household term, because it is so integral in so many of the issues that we have today. So essentially, oxidative stress is the reason why we need antioxidants. Now, biochemically, it is when our electrons, if you remember from like science class in junior high or high school, you're drawing the atom with the electrons and they're in pairs on the outer ring. And so electrons like to be in pairs. And so certain things like stressors and radiation and just everyday respiration can knock one of those electrons free. And so antioxidants donate electrons so that they can be paired up again. So essentially, an antioxidant neutralizes a free radical, and free radicals are what cause oxidative stress. Oxidative stress is damage to the cell. That's damage to the cellular structure and damage to the cell information, so the information contained within the cell. And when I was writing my book, which is academically published, I was combing the scientific literature because I was like, nobody's ever specified, does inflammation cause oxidative stress or does oxidative stress cause inflammation? And it is this cyclical relationship. So one increases the other. And so making sure you have antioxidants to stop that cascade is really, really important. And knowing your genes can tell you what your predispositions are for your antioxidant capacities.
I love that. Again, like underscored, this is why I wanted you on the podcast, because anybody struggling with autoimmunity, or even if they're not struggling, if they're like on the side where I am now, this information is so powerful. And really important to understand. It's, it's the chicken or the egg, right? And so to me, it just becomes a snowball of like, okay, no, are antioxidants gonna like necessarily eliminate your inflammation? No, but and I do think we've evolved, not I think it's a fact, we've evolved slower than the world around us. And so I think we're just bombarded, whether it's toxins, like all the things. And that's that imbalance, if you will, of like why this is so prevalent, with why infertility is, skyrocketing, why autoimmunity is skyrocketing, and all other chronic health challenges. And so I love just the conversation on what you talked about, like understanding your genetics may, give you a direction of like, okay, you probably are going to need these antioxidants. Let's talk a little bit about if people have heard the word antioxidants and maybe they don't know what they are. Like,
okay, so
what are some examples?
Something that oxidizes. So we do need inflammation and free radicals. It's that Goldilocks zone, right? If we didn't have any free radicals or inflammation, we wouldn't be able to fight off pathogens, and we wouldn't be able to, inflammation is supposed to be temporary to kind of, it's like turning the fire hose on to put the fire out. But once the fire's out, you don't want to keep the hose on because then you can get mold and all kinds of other funky stuff. So we need to have that Goldilocks zone with antioxidants.
Okay. And if somebody's like, is that something I should be supplementing with, or I know we're not giving medical advice, but what are examples of common antioxidants people may or may not, be including in diet or supplementing with?
Well, I always say, let's start with food, right? So food, the rainbow of foods, right? Especially the reds and the purples, your pomegranate, your blueberries, your acai berries, all of those are really, really rich in antioxidants, and also bioflavonoids and polyphenols. All of those have antioxidant abilities as well. But you can
so it's not just red wine.
Correct. I think the alcohol actually negates the benefits.
I would imagine, but I think it's the like most popular thing people think of.
So you can also supplement with antioxidants, and the most common one is called glutathione. That is known as the body's master antioxidant, because usually when an antioxidant donates an electron to neutralize a free radical, it's rendered ineffective. It's kaput. It can't do its job anymore. The gun's not loaded anymore. But glutathione is called the master antioxidant because, depending on your genetics, you have an ability to recycle and regenerate your antioxidants. are your glutathione, and your glutathione can also help to regenerate your vitamin C and your vitamin E and other antioxidants. So it's really, really powerful, really, really important, but it's not the only one. You never hardly ever hear about superoxide dismutase and catalase and NRF2 and all of these really, really important things. I could nerd out about NRF2. I talk about it a lot in my book because a lot of people are focused on the glutathione genes, but you could have no variations in your glutathione genes, but if you don't have enough of this thing called NRF2, which is like the spark plug for all of your antioxidant and detoxification reactions, your glutathione is not going to work. It's going to be as if you had genetic variants. So you can't just say, oh, well, you have this genetic variant, so take this supplement, and you have this one and take that one. And so that's why I have a problem with a lot of the genetic interpretations on the market, because they're just reporting about your genes. They're saying, oh, you have this genetic variant, so take this form of a supplement. And then 10 pages later, they're saying, well, you have this genetic variant, so avoid this form of that supplement that they just told you to take. And so it's not comprehensive, and there's a lot of contradictory information, and so many people get analysis paralysis when you just have these automated canned response.
I was going to say that they're mostly AI algorithm driven to sell supplements is what a lot of them end up being.
Yes. So
yeah.
I like to say that I am like your genetics concierge, because when I do interpretations, they take me hours. People can send me their labs depending on which package they get. There's a really meticulous intake form where I am asking about your sleep, your poop, your periods, what you've tried that has worked, what you tried that hasn't worked, what's your sleep like, where you live. Do you live near a soy or a cornfield, maybe? And then especially if you have variants in your PON1 gene, that could really cause you to not be able to clear pesticides and organophosphates very well. So I ask so many questions. And then, like I said, there's the labs and then the genetics, and we pair all that together. And I'm also emailing as I'm reviewing your genes. Hey, I'm seeing a predisposition for early premature graying of hair because this genetic variant, does that run in your family? And if not, okay, so maybe they have the genetic variant, but just because you have a genetic variant does not mean that it's expressing.
Say that again, because that's the most important part of the conversation.
Yes, just because you have a genetic variant does not mean it's expressing. And a lot of people think it's an off or on switch, but really I think of it as like a dimmer switch. So the amount of toxicity or the amount of stress or amount of trauma that you may or may not have had can determine how turned on or turned off that gene will be and how much it will be expressing or not.
I like the dimmer switch thought, because especially like if you were ever bored, I would send you my genetic work. Like you would look at that and think, okay, we got to either shut all this down or figure out how to turn all that on. And so we're not designed that way. We aren't computers.
Correct.
So
so many, like the body is just infinitely wise. So the more important that a process or pathway is, the more backup routes it has.
Yes.
Because it needs to make sure that it gets that job done. So if path A is clogged or slow or inefficient, then it's going to resort to plan B and path B. And hopefully you have the nutritional cofactors to support the functioning of that pathway, or hopefully there aren't toxins that are throwing wrenches in that pathway.
Yeah. So important. And I think one of the things that I enjoy listening to you educate us all. Yes, because I'm a nerd, and I know your book is not a small book, but it sounds like lots of fun to me. But it's the whole human approach. Like you're not just running you just said, you're not just looking at genetics and giving, spitting out what an AI program would spit out. You're doing all kinds of testing with people. And again, initially, the focus is fertility. To me, it's the same. Like optimizing is optimizing, period. Mm-hmm. Finding roadblocks, I call it looking under rocks. Mm-hmm. Yep. And if you miss one, you can get some improvement. But when your end goal is something like, healthy baby, if you miss one, you may still miss the mark on that. So I love that you're really taking into account the whole human.
Thank you. Yes, it's so much more holistic, but also there's so many more benefits to doing that. And we have so much more successes.
Yeah. Yeah. And you also do like regular, what I call regular, it's funny, like what I call like a regular functional medicine panel. Which I had a client who is in Pennsylvania, not your area in Pennsylvania, and she has a functional medicine doctor. And I didn't think to look at her panel as to like what the functional medicine panel was. Like it was missing so much. But sometimes we jump to big and fancy, and we have horrible omegas and Ds and just basics.
Mhm.
And so I love that you're not just like super geeky nerdy looking at the really complicated stuff, but you're including other important foundational things.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's why I put in a chapter in my book that no matter what your genetics are, these are the things that are healthy for every living being on Earth. Whereas, and I've seen some genetic reports that people have brought to me, and they're like, oh, well, you have this genetic variant, so avoid processed foods and make sure you get exercise. And I'm just like, you paid how much money to get this generic information? So I really like that, like, the more I learn, the more I realize it really comes back to those foundations, right? Being outside, getting fresh, clean air, fresh, clean water, moving your body in a loving way, getting enough sleep, not eating too much sugar, all of that. But then if there's people that are already doing quote unquote all the things, but they still have a whole bunch of chronic pain or recurring yeast or UTI infections or, whatever it is, then we can really use the genetics and the lab testing to find the root cause and address it with precision.
Amen. And I love that. I was hooked when you were like, if you're, in the fast food line, I'm not for you. Like you're not ready for me yet.
Right.
People think like they can shortcut or what is you can't, what is it, you can't not out eat, there's a saying about like we can't trade one thing for the other. I got into functional medicine through biohacking, and not in the sense of well, I don't want to exercise but I want to stay healthy, or yeah, there's a little bit of shortcut mentality, but it's actually really, you can't skip any of those foundations. If you're sleeping 4 hours a night and eating the best food and drinking the best water and have a great movement routine and all the things, you're still not going to be healthy. Eventually, it's going to catch up with you.
Yes. Yeah. And I say that especially in regards to mold, because it doesn't really matter what your genetics are. Yes, there's some that can really make it like 1 + 1 = 5.
Yeah.
But really, like, mold just throws a wrench in your detoxification pathways, and it causes you've been living in mold for a while and you're really sensitive to it, you're going to have some histamine issues. But then if you have genetic predispositions for histamine tolerance, that just means you're going to be that much further off the mark.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I love everything I've heard you say in other interviews, or it is again, it's the same, mold and mycotoxins are an underlying driver of inflammation, which therefore also means of autoimmunity. And I do feel like, and I know there is science behind, and studies are coming out as to why is it so much more prevalent now? Is it the testing? Are we just aware? And I think it really is more prevalent now. And some of that are the EMFs, and the mycotoxins are more active. So those of us walking around that may be more susceptible to begin with are feeling these secondary downstream effects. And it doesn't mean you have to be, especially, I call myself a collector. I am a collector of anything that might not have been good for my body, likes to just keep it.
Wow.
Um,
Oh,
and I was pretty shocked when I learned and started to heal and learn more and got into functional medicine. And um, I was already living in Colorado for years by the time I did my first toxin panel, and my mycotoxins were through the roof. Well, I had lived in South Florida for 13 years.
yeah.
And I mean, I'm still working on that 20 something years later of, it's better and I feel great, but it's still there. And if I stop working on it, it's going to bite me again. And also it doesn't matter where you live. It can, like when I moved to Colorado, I was told, through realtors, there's no mold problem here.
Mhm.
It's dry here. We don't have mold.
Yeah.
There's mold everywhere. And I love that you talk about that as being something really important to check with people is toxin, not just their pathways, but also what's going on in their body. Like you can't just do the one or the other.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have a whole chapter on mold and mycotoxins because it's a lot of people, first off, they don't really know how impactful negatively it is. It's just
Yeah.
toxic to basically all your cells. But also they think, well, I don't see any mold, so I haven't been
Right.
exposed to it. And so while my expertise doesn't lie in testing and remediation of environments, my specialty is more identifying it in the body, seeing if it has colonized, and then detoxifying it with precision because certain molds are cleared through certain liver detox pathways or have affinities for specific binders. And so knowing what you're dealing with will help you to know which is the most effective route to get it out of your body. And yes, it can stay in your body for decades.
Yeah. Especially when it's not the only thing in there, when you've got
Yes.
lead and mercury and all kinds of other goodies. Like
And,
it's
there's that mold and Lime, all of those
yes.
people that have gotten the unlucky combination for sure.
Yeah. Well, and again, it's really not that much of a mystery. I used to get frustrated before I really understood. My fiance used to say all the time, like with Lyme, um, it's not the Lyme. Like it's not, your body should be taking care of it, and test 100 people, symptomatic, asymptomatic, and a lot of us have Lyme.
Mhm.
And why are some people so sick? And some of it definitely genetic predisposition. And like you said, and then is there that double whammy? And I find it fascinating that if you think back to how the body works and what it's designed to do, then what are these roadblocks, and so that's where I think your field it's so empowering to understand that, I hear it all the time too with autoimmune. Well, my mom had RA and her sister has RA and it's like, okay, but are you all living a similar lifestyle too? It's like
Right,
saying, oh, well, our family is full of diabetics. Well, do you eat together? I'm just curious,
right, yeah. Or same maybe energy or trauma or something like that
Yeah.
as well. Yep.
Yeah. And so I just think it just gives it for listeners to understand that getting this information can be really powerful. And then finding somebody like you, I love the word precision, right? You want to detox with precision. I tell listeners, I say it all the time. My approach to healing was throw spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks because I didn't know what I was doing. I had never heard of functional medicine. I had, and so I got lucky and think I was just supposed to find my way to wellness so that I could do this.
Mhm.
But the precision isn't important because as we are all human, we're also a bio individual. So I
Yes.
love that, that you're just have that scientific mind. I can tell it's like an addiction with you. So the rabbit hole
Yes.
gets bigger.
Yeah, well, like I said, the more I learn, the more I realize how much I don't know. So then the more
Sure.
I want to learn about it. And then it's just
Yeah.
like rabbit holes galore.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. But in a good way. It's a wonderful thing. Tell us a little bit about how do you work with people? How do people find you and what does that look like? What's your process?
Okay, so my website is just jaclyndowns.com, JACLYNDOWNS. And I do have a resources page that has all the different ways you can work with me, whether it's genetic interpretation or one-to-one consultations, or if you just want some freebies. And then I am very, very bad at posting on Instagram, but my
Oh, me
handle is
too.
at Functional Genomics. So I'm working on, I feel like I have like blank slate or blank canvas anxiety, because like obviously I have a whole entire book's worth of information, but I'm like, I don't know what to post about. But it's also really
Uh,
hard when it's very biochemical and trying to put it into layman's terms, which I'm good at, but not within 90 seconds,
well, I was going to say snippets are, and also for some of us, and I shouldn't put this on you. It's not my happy place. I would rather do this and have amazing conversations with incredible experts and get jazzed and then go down another rabbit hole on my own time
Mhm.
than, be putting out that kind of content. But I love I always appreciate the people that are good at breaking their stuff down because everybody learns differently. So,
Absolutely. Yes.
yeah, so I love that you qualified. Like I'm there, I'm just not the
Yes, yeah. Or I
but
have something that I need to share. Like I'll rant
the
about MTHFR, or I'll rant about bile. Like I've been in the nutrition industry for decades, and even when I was like going to work with my dad and stuff, um, it's only been in like the past 2 or 3 years that I have started to hear about bile, and I love bile. I could talk. I've done podcasts completely just talking about bile.
well,
Uh,
we may have to have a whole
yeah.
nother conversation just about bile because it's essential, it's important, and I feel like that's just another area of the body that's been slammed with modern times.
Yes, and it's the unsung hero. Everybody wants to go and do a liver detox, but if your bile's not flowing, those toxins are going to get mobilized, and then they're just going to get recirculated right back to where they started. And so there's so many other important things that bile does too, but there's also a lot of genes related to bile production and bile flow. And so again, like, yes, if you have mold, that's going to just cause sludgy bile. But then if you have genetic variants, I use the analogy that like of like a scale. And so sometimes we don't know how big or heavy the marbles are with the genetic variants, but we know which side of the scale to place them on. So if you have been living in mold, for example, then boom, there's like a big old marble on the one side. And then you throw these separate genetic variants from these different genes and different SNPs, that's going to just be adding weight to the side of the scale for there to be some bile or gallbladder issues.
So interesting. And see, you do put it all in layman's terms. Like I'm a visual learner, so I love that the visual of the scale. Although I'm thinking like younger listeners probably don't even know what a real scale looks like.
Just every single lawyer's
A
logo, right?
teeter totter.
Yes.
Right, right. A seesaw if you're from the East Coast.
There you go. Yes.
So amazing. For those that might have missed it in the intro, your book, which is not a little Instagram snippet, is Enhancing Fertility Through Functional Medicine Using Nutrigenomics to Solve Unexplained Infertility. And I would say, you already said it, but it's your book, so I'm going to say it. It's really a wellness book.
Yes.
It's a wellness book. And I can't wait to dig in. And like you said, it's not for the beginner. In the health world, it's a big book, but I love that you're also focused on educating practitioners
Yeah.
because that's
Yes.
what we need more practitioners understanding, all of this.
Yes,
So,
that's my goal. That's my sweet spot, that Venn diagram. Because originally I was going to write two books, one for the layperson and one for the
ah,
practitioner. But what I did was I put all of the biochemical, technical, genetic stuff into appendices for each chapter. So take what you want, leave what you don't. You don't have to turn to the appendices if you don't want to. So that way it's something that you can get even if you don't understand a lot of it, and it's actually not a very fat book at all. It's just very information heavy. But I a while ago when it first came out and got published, I said like on Instagram, like just name a random page number and I will read it and I will guarantee there will be a clinical pearl on that page. And so I did probably about 6 or 8 Instagram posts with page numbers that people had given me. And yeah, I'm like, oh my God, I'm so glad they picked this page. This is like, I love this information. So if you want, you can scroll down through my feed and you'll see I'll be holding my book in a couple of those.
I love it. You should do more of those. There it is right there. That's what you should do. Those are your snippets, is do more of those.
That's a good idea. I will do that because, it's the new year. So I should be posting more. Yeah, I am doing a new thing for my newsletter list where I am going to be spotlighting a gene. So,
I love that.
Yeah. So this is the gene.
It's not just MTHFR.
Exactly. Yeah. So this is the gene. This is what it does. This is how variants can affect you. And this is how you can support it. Of course, no gene works in isolation. So that's all, not medical advice or take it.
Right.
Yeah. Just so that people know that it's not just, the top 3 that people hear about is first, usually MTHFR, which is great. It introduces people to the concept that your genes influence your health and your state of health influences the way that your genes are expressed. So that's great. That's why, MTHFR is a gateway gene. But then people hear about COMT and they say they have the COMT variant when literally there are hundreds of them. And so, I know which one they're talking about. They're talking about the Valmet, but still, there's more than one. And then people hear about CVS. So those are like the top 3, the popular crowd.
Okay. And so then I was gonna say, and then the brain health focused people, the ApoE, we got to throw that one in there.
Yep. And I look at all of those, but when I do my interpretations, I don't do your typical, like, here's the set list of genes, because I literally look at thousands of, so based on what somebody has written in their intake form, what their goals are, what their previous diagnoses are, or where I'm seeing the most genetic variants is what I mentioned. So if you don't have, like, I will just say you do not have any MTHFR variants, right? But I won't
but you don't have to go into that.
How it's going to affect you, because people want to know about that. But yeah, so I mentioned the ones that are noteworthy and could be impacting your situation that you're concerned about.
I love that. Well, we're at the point of the interview where listeners are leaning in because they want to hear your one step that listeners can take today to start to improve their health.
Avoidance of toxins, because we live in a toxic soup of a planet. And so it's becoming harder and harder and harder. We have to I say in my book that survival of the fittest now means being proactive about your own health and being your own health advocate, because there's so many things that are bombarding us with toxins that are just burdening our liver and kidneys. And so the more that we can avoid them coming into the body, then the less hard our liver and kidneys and detoxification pathways have to work to just try to maintain homeostasis.
Amazing. Wonderful gold.
Yes. Yeah. So that's, your home environment, your water, your air, water, and food are a great place to start. Your kitchenware, your body care products, that kind of stuff.
I know, it doesn't end.
Yeah. And it is overwhelming, but I say use a this is better than that approach. So maybe next time, don't buy the Lysol, buy, something else. And if you want to be like super nerdy, you can get the hypochlorous acid, right?
Which is awesome as well. And I can't stand the smell of vinegar. So that one's a winner for me.
Yeah.
Jaclyn, thank you so much. You really have given us so much information before to get to know you a little bit. I say, check out the book, check out the snippets on Instagram too, but definitely go to Jaclyn's website. And we appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed speaking with you, and I look forward to speaking with you again.
Absolutely. For everyone listening, remember you can get the show notes and transcripts by visiting inspiredliving.show. Hope you had a great time and enjoyed this episode as much as I did. I'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to Julie Michelson's Inspired Living with Autoimmunity. Did you enjoy this episode? Please like, share, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. If you'd like to get a transcript of this and every other episode, just head on over to inspiredliving.show or click on the link in this episode's description. There, you can also find everything we discussed in this episode, including links and information about our guest. You can even send in your questions to be answered by Julie in a future episode. That's inspiredliving.show. Until next time, this is Julie Michelson's Inspired Living with Autoimmunity podcast, helping you take your power back.